So here we are with the fish. I am looking forward to talking with you and bonding with you and commiserating with you and giving you my 4 little scientific principles of the day to help you with depression. I wanted to show you, these are my neon tetras, and it's lovely to be under the water with them without drowning. Isn't that lovely? And I have a beta fish. He's in here somewhere. He's very big and red, and you should see him come by. So you can watch him while we talk, okay? I think it's gonna be wonderful. I am an actual physician, as you know. My license number is in the description below. I do use evidence-based information and tactics to share with you about depression and to encourage you. There's a lot of bad information out there about depression, so please be careful. Always go to your licensed provider. Always talk to your therapist. Don't always trust what you hear online or what you might hear in an ASMR video. I cannot give you any official medical advice because even though I do have some behavioral health credentials, you and I have never met in real life. I think that we can cheer you up a little bit, even though medically diagnosed depression, not just feeling down, is never a simple matter of, oh, I'm going to do magic facey face things and I'm going to cure your depression. Depression is a serious medical illness. You need a personalized provider who can take care of you, okay? So all that said, let's get started. So, if you've seen the other videos in this series, you know I always leave an evidence-based handout in the description. I don't know how many of you have been using them, but those are actually medically designed handouts used by professional psychologists. And so I highly, highly recommend that you actually take a look at them and use them. I don't know if you can hear the birds yelling in the background. I don't know if it matters or not. They didn't want to leave. They wanted to be part of this adventure with us. But Mango kept yelling, and that's not very relaxing. I don't know how much I'm gonna leave in this time, but let's honest time here. I just had one of my first days in a new military clinic, and I almost had a panic attack today. I've spent about a year and a half doing operational medicine, and before that I did about a year and a half of hospital medicine, all with the military, and I have seen a lot of awful and sad things. Things like, I've taken care of, so I've held a lot of dead babies, and I've taken care of a lot of people after they've been raped. So not fun stuff. So I know what it's like, dear one, to go through things that are difficult. A couple years ago, my little brother died, and recently, I can't quite talk about it comfortably yet, but I have a big heart for people who've suffered injustice. If you've suffered injustice, I was accused of something I didn't do, and it was bad. I always have really good relationships with my patients, fortunately, and I was defending a patient from somebody else, and the somebody else accused me of something, and then later accused the patient of something as well. So, because that's how they roll. And that's, all within the last several years. And I have a medical illness that means that I'm in pain all of the time. It is, sometimes my pain level, like right now, it's only about a 3. It's not that bad. I'm sitting here smiling and talking to you. I can forget about it, partly. By the end of this video, I will not be able to forget about it. So I have to kind of manage it with a lot of psychology and stuff like that. but and I can get it at its lowest, maybe down to a 2, but I am always in pain. So I know what it's like to have many, many reasons to be depressed. Some of you have many more reasons. You might have so many more reasons than I do. Okay. Or you might feel like you have no reason. You might just have your neurotransmitters all out of balance. And that's okay too. I know someone who has very, very severe depression, who I care about very, very much. Who, one of the things they hate about themselves is that depression seems to not have a reason. And that is not a reason to hate yourself either. My dear little one. Okay. So I just want to say, whoever you are and wherever you are so valuable. And I know you've heard that a million times. These positive affirmations don't work for a lot of people. I know they don't work for me. Like, I don't watch positive affirmation videos because I find myself arguing with them. I find myself saying, no, that's not true, blah, 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 and so on and so forth. That is why I'm telling you things that I know are true. I'm telling you things about me. Because I know me, and I know the struggles that I've gone through, and I know what it's like to be a good person. I know what it's like to be a bad person. I know what it's like to have people lie about you. I know what it's like to be in a lot of different weird positions. I know what it's like to be the hero, and I know what it's like to be the villain. So, and I know what it's like to have less problems than other people and have to solve their problem. I know what it's like to sit in the room with someone who has just had the worst thing in their life happen, something that is so terrible I can't even imagine it, and have to take care of them and have to tell them what to do. And it's like, how, and I know what it's like to take care of heroes who've done amazing things and tell them what to do. And that is overwhelming. It can be overwhelming to be like, wow, do I have enough? Do I have what it takes to give this person the care they deserve? This is why I had a panic attack today, almost, as I was getting ready to go to this new clinic. Because there's this fear, am I good enough? How am I going to be good enough after everything that's happened to me? Am I going to be able to handle it? Am I going to be able to do it? Can I make it? Right? And I'm sharing this stuff with you because to date, after 1,000 videos, the most popular video is the video where I almost cried. And that is the first video of this series, where I talked about the depression criteria from the DSM-5. And I was really hurting for you, because I was thinking about how it feels to be me and how it feels to be you, and how much suffering there is, and how absolutely very difficult and challenging it is to handle severe depression. And I'm talking like when you're hospitalized and you need something done with your neurotransmitters, that kind of depression. That's what I'm saying. Medical depression is not just, oh, let me say some pretty things to you. And I'm not dissing ASMR, obviously, I like to do it. I'm not dissing ASMR artists. I'm not dissing however you choose to feel better. What I'm saying is, for those of you who get angry at those things, and for whom those things don't help, I get it. I can't watch medical role plays because they make me so upset. So sometimes you'll probably see me out around places. I'll comment on different medical role plays to give help on like how it can be more realistic, how we do it as an actual physician, and so forth. But a lot of times, and I have listened, and I do, for those comments, I want to be constructive and useful, so I actually listen to the video, obviously. But the fact is, those role plays make me extremely uncomfortable. And it makes me, I hear ASMR artists giving medical advice also online, and sometimes really big ASMR artists who I really respect in a lot of other ways, but then they'll give them medical advice, and I'll be like, your mom can give medical advice, it's just fine. My fear is, be careful who you trust, and I just want to say, I know that it's a big, scary, weird, blah, blah, blah. It's a silly world. It's a silly world where we say silly things and we have trouble controlling our mouths in more ways than one, right? And because of that, sometimes you may find that you may feel like nothing's helped. maybe then nothing's helped. Because, my dear, you haven't had the real stuff. Okay? Sometimes it's not anyone's fault. I'm gonna use both hands because your face is just so beautiful. I just wanna. So, I love putting my hand close to your face and feeling the warmth of it radiating off. And then you are so alive. I love your aliveness. So, all of that aside, so we've had our disclaimer, we've had our little before, right? I basically, bottom line to all that stuff is, I get it, the world sucks. Okay. There are some things that we can do about depression, and I really encourage you to try to use the handouts that I put in those descriptions, especially while you're waiting for your therapist or with your therapist. Bring those handouts to your therapist. Really work on them on your own first, right? Write everything out. Bring them to your therapist and say, hey, I found this handout online and I was working through it. I was wondering if you could give me advice on my answers and if you could help me walk through it. And that's all you have to say. They usually appreciate, a good therapist will appreciate that you've been trying to do your homework. In fact, the psychologists I've worked with usually complain about people who are not willing to do the effort. Okay? So download those handouts, work through them, bring them to your therapist, say, I worked through this handout. I'm trying to get better. I am. Let's talk about this. Okay? They all have different techniques that can help you out. Some of them being things like diet. Those of you who've watched my videos know this magazine is like one of my favorite triggers, even though we went through and we did a video where we debunked this magazine. I love this, and we're going to go through the whole book and talk about all the superfoods at some point in time. But diet is a big thing. Medications are another option. I prescribe psychoactive medications, behavioral health medications for my patients. So I have some experience with them. People are plus or minus on medication. You'll see people talk about them saving their lives and people for whom they're completely useless. And that is all up to you. Okay. One big warning that you should know is teenagers need to be very careful about seeing counseling first instead of medication. Unless they're in an emergency and being hospitalized, because medications for teenagers tend to have an increased risk of causing suicidal ideation. Okay? And that's why I say these things are very serious. People die of these conditions. This isn't just a fun, oh, let's make a video and put depression in the tagline. And I don't want to be guilty of that. Okay. Some of you know that I affiliate also with a therapy company called BetterHelp.com. And it is true, I do have a link, betterhelp.com/drjen, and 10% off therapy and all that. But to me, it's important, so you'll see other people affiliate with that company as well, other ASMR artists, because a lot of people in the ASMR community have problems that need a therapist. But regardless of what somebody is affiliating with, you have to do what's best for you. So if an online therapy option doesn't work for you, that's why you don't really see me being very aggressive or salesy about that affiliation, because even though I love that company, and I really hope that especially in these times, people can use online therapy options, and I like that they're an affordable option too. If your insurance doesn't cover therapy, you still deserve therapy, and you still deserve to be taken care of. And so you still deserve to get care from people. And so that's why I like the online option. I like that it's cheap, right? But I think the bottom line is, and the thing that needs to be taken very seriously is, you need to be careful to find somebody that works for you. Don't just be like, oh, okay, she said I can get a coupon, and she's a doctor, and I like ASMR. I'm going to go to that company, and I'm going to use their people. And I'm not going to talk to my physician about my medications or anything else like that. Just because I feel like it kind of, I don't want to put it that way. I don't want to say that you are going to trivialize your care. what I want to say is you have to be willing to fire your therapist, which is something I've said often before. You have to be willing to go into what your, how do I put this? So for example, if you were to sign up for that company and try out one of their therapists, if that therapist doesn't work for you, you can fire that therapist and find another one in their database, or fire the therapist, find a real life person. Sometimes you have to have a person in your real life, and that's just how it is. And sometimes it's better to have someone who's farther removed, because that, it's a completely different perspective. Sometimes some people feel uncomfortable with a psychologist and so forth. You can ask for a social worker. You might be uncomfortable with a social worker. You can ask for a psychologist. You might be uncomfortable with both, and you might want to go talk to your pastor or chaplain or whoever, somebody who's been trained though, okay? Because there are religious professionals who've been trained in mental health counseling and suicide prevention and things like that. I've been trained in suicide prevention and mental health care, and so specifically with medications and so forth. And so that's something that I do in my own practice, or I have historically done at this new clinic. We'll see. So I hope that point was across, like that you have resources available to you, and I want you to take yourself seriously. I want you to take this seriously. We might be doing fun little videos with triggers, and I'm very excited that this is video number 1000. Not video number 1000. I've hit my 1000 subscribers, and this is the video for that, right? But I think that instead of just being like, yay, 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 I wanted to make something useful to remind you, take this seriously, take yourself seriously. Because we are going to talk about some non-serious things here. Okay. Thing number 2, having a support network is a big major part of taking care of yourself for depression. We talk about, so what's actually a thing we'll ask, and your psychiatrist will ask you, how's your relationship with your family? How's your relationship with your coworkers? How's your relationship with your friends? Do you have like a community thing, like an organized community, like church or something like that? Your synagogue, your temple. And you could, so if you don't have, so depending on, who you go to, or you might go to your imam or your guru also with your medical stuff. Again, make sure that they're trained in psychological care. That's why I say, with some hesitance, the friends thing, that there are friends who are terrible, who will turn you down or hurt you once they find out about your psychological weaknesses. I've been there. I understand where people like you until they find out you're dark, and then they don't like you anymore. So I understand that. I understand that danger. I understand that fear. Okay. I also understand that if you never open up to anyone, you may be missing out on some really great wisdom within your support network. Yes, exactly. I know I haven't let you talk like at all this time. Yeah. So that's thing number 2, have your support network. Thing number 1 was what? Yeah, take this seriously. And thing number 2 was have your support network. That's right. Thing number 3 and 4 are 2 techniques I want to talk about that are, I think, going to be mentioned in the handout that I have below for you today. I'm so excited to start the series with the handout I have below today. That series is on DBT. We've talked a lot about CBT, and we will go back to it and talk about it some more. I will probably go through the CBT book with you as we continue to progress in our depression series. But depression and mental health, since we did a PTSD video, and we'll probably do a panic attacks video, we'll do a couple. We'll do what you need. So, I get myself distracted. I got thinking about another little piece of this video that I want to share with you. And actually, I'll go ahead and share it now. I'll probably move this to an earlier part of the video. But, Maybe not. Okay, so awkward pause here. I'm gonna have to edit this. I hope this video doesn't make me have to do too much editing. This is who I am. This is what I do. So, things number 3 and 4 are things that we often judge in our society, but actually can be really, really helpful. So thing 3 is a technique. One psychologist, new psychologist that I'm working with now, one of my pain psychologists, actually said this is something his soldiers who were torture victims used to, had used, like POWs and stuff would use. Which didn't surprise me, because another psychiatrist that I studied, Viktor Frankl, and I always leave a link to Viktor Frankl's book, always in the description. I also always leave a link to the suicide helpline, always leave a link to all those kind of things. I'm gonna start putting them in the comments because I think a lot of y'all don't see them. I know, I'm sorry, it breaks the illusion when I talk about the description, which is maybe why I don't usually do it. Which is maybe why nobody knows about it. I love what JoJo ASMR does, where he puts that at the end. He tells you, especially at the end of his like worst rated videos. And I love that. But people be asleep by the end, yo. You might not be awake then, might not be around. So I'm going to tell you now, those important links for your help and your self-care are in the description. And Viktor Frankl. So Viktor Frankl also talks about how when he was in a concentration camp, he found that this technique, which I've already given it away, that this technique helped him and it helped other concentration camp survivors. I have a lot of trouble using this technique when I'm in pain, so I'm working on getting better at that. But it is a good technique, and it has worked. It has helped me with, apparently I also have a sleep disorder, so it's helped me with that. I have so many problems. My doctor talked to me today, and I argued with him for like an hour. Like, are you sure? Are you sure? I don't know if I want to have another. Okay, alright. I've already put it on my form anyway. This technique is using your imagination and visualizing something. We have a tendency to judge things as like an escape or cowardly if they come from your brain and they're not real. Or like a child saying, like, children, use your imagination. Or like, I've always judged like escapism. Or we judge adults using your brain not to make something creative, but just to come up with an image. Like guided imagery is the technique, that's what it's officially called. These soldiers in these situations didn't know special guided imagery. What they did is they would just imagine they were somewhere else, and they would imagine it really hard, but they felt like they were somewhere else. They would imagine what's going on. One guy imagined walking his daughter down the aisle with somebody that this pain psychologist told me about. Viktor Frankl imagined his wife, and this beautiful image of her and who she was, and how much he loved her. It doesn't have to be real stuff, it can be imaginary stuff. We have a tendency to associate images with, like, if a person is fantasizing, it must be sexual. But these are not sexual images. These are like images for that appeal to your deepest nature, not just necessarily your immediate hormonal needs, but your very deep, like the deepest frontal cortex neurotransmitter, like your soul needs, right? Things like he's thinking about his daughter, he's thinking about his wife, and that's keeping him going. And you may not be family that you're thinking about, it may be something else. I come up with stories, and I live them in my head, and that helps me to feel better. And that technique, I think, is a lot of times judged. I'm not saying, and I've seen patients be like, yeah, the psychologist told me to use my imagination for my depression, that's useless. And I think it can be the way that it's projected. I think it can be Somebody might just somebody might be really suffering, and your brain may be full of all kinds of noises and things like that, and you can't get your brain to shut up. And that situation is kind of unhelpful for someone to just tell you to think of something else. It's not helpful. So again, having a therapist or using medication can be really helpful, and it's something that I say again and again and again in all these videos, because I'm not gonna fail to say something and have someone die essentially on my watch, right? So that's why I say these things kind of so seriously, because I'm talking to you who you could be in serious trouble, and I don't want you to be. I don't want you to stay, right? But that said, these people who are in serious, horrible conditions survived with this, imagining thing. And once I started doing that for my nightmares. There's a nightmare technique we talked about in the PTSD video. Really, the breakthrough moment was writing it out, because I couldn't visualize, I couldn't get my brain that way. Writing things out. So writing things out that are imaginary can help you. Viktor Frankl talks about how his writings were taken away by the Nazis when he was put in the concentration camp. So all he had was his mind, right? All he had was what he could imagine. So take that and think about it. Practice it. Practice imagining things. Practice sitting down quietly and imagining things, and seeing how far that takes you. And if it doesn't work at first, that's okay. I have had times when I would like to try that technique, but I'm too much pain to do so, or my brain is too loud to do so. It happens. It is a struggle. Okay? If something doesn't work one day, try it again another day, because it might work another day. Because things change. Everything isn't going to be the same all the time. Okay? And that's why diet and exercise are important, because they help to make your body and the chemicals in your body more regular and regulated, right? So your the chemicals that you get in your food become the chemicals that make up your body, right? So that makes a difference. Yep. So half your plate should be leafy greens or some other colorful vegetable or fruit. Tomatoes and blueberries count. Potatoes and corn do not. Okay? It doesn't have to be unpleasant. It can be pleasant and wonderful. You sometimes have to make yourself do it the same way you make yourself take medication. Those moments when you're so down you can't do anything, that's when you gotta ask somebody for help. You have to be like, hey, I need you to bring me a salad. I can't do anything right now. But remember how we said activity? I think in our very first video, the opposite of depression. The opposite of depression is not happiness, it's activity. Forcing yourself to do one activity. That one activity might be, this week I'm gonna eat a vegetable every day. I'm doing this one thing. Kind of like that, pulling yourself up, that picking one win, right? I used to reward myself every day for staying alive that day, because I was in such a bad place. Yep. Yeah. So that, you never know what someone's struggling with. Someone might not have something that pops up on a urine test. Somebody's terrible struggle might be quite invisible to you. Yep. Just like your struggle is sometimes invisible to other people. And part of getting out of that is getting help from outside you. So, and yes, since you asked, yes, getting help from God does count as outside you, and that's a good thing. Sometimes you'll be in positions where you can't trust anyone else, like if you're in a prisoner of war camp, and you can't ask for help from anyone else outside you, because it may be somebody like that. However, if you do have other people available to you, you don't want to be like that person who God sent a helicopter to help them out of a flood, and they said no, and they drowned in the flood. Or God sent diabetic medication to help them with their diabetes, and they said no, and they died of their diabetes. You know what? I may sound like I'm joking, and obviously I'm a physician, so I'm very practical. So, yep, not to dash or joke about anything that's important to you spiritually, but to say, like, look around for practical things, and sometimes you do need to accept, and invite other people into your circle. And of course, other times, and this is back to thing number 2, the support network. I've been in positions, and I get it. I've been in positions where you keep reaching out for help, and nobody is helping, and you try and try and try, and you feel like you have, done everything you can, and nobody seems to care that you're in pain or that you're suffering. I didn't care. Also, I get it. I understand that. I really do, because people still don't care about invisible illnesses. If they're missing a leg, they'll treat you differently. If you have cancer, they'll treat you one day, but something that's invisible, they don't care. And I'm very sorry if that's been your experience. It certainly has been in certain situations. Or the people who help you, like, judge you or doing it because it's their, job. And you don't feel wanted. You feel like you're a burden. I get that. I get that. You feel like nobody really cares. I get that too. So all of those things, all of those thoughts, I understand them. The big principles with CBT, remember, and we talked about this, I think, in the second video, is going back and putting down the evidence for those thoughts, because sometimes we can be making assumptions about people that are not true, right? Somebody might be wanting to help you, and you might not be letting you. So you got to put down, I think my psychologist thinks I'm a burden. You write it down. Okay, what's the evidence for that? Have they ever said this? What have they done that I would think that? Blah, 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 and go through. And what's the evidence against? And in the end, does it matter? Because it's their job. They have to help you whether they effing want to or not. I'm worth that. I'm worth them having to help me whether they like it or not. And you don't have to be like that. You don't have to be up in people's face. You can, if that's not your style, you can, I'm just saying, and that might be one coping mechanism for somebody. A different coping mechanism might be, what I've started doing is when I feel that way, I've started asking, am I asked my psychologist this last time, what do you think of me? Because I don't like to ask. I like to just go with my automatic thoughts and assume. And right, and what's that called? That is called mind reading. We will go through the automatic thinking errors together at some point. I think I may have already linked to it in one video, but I'll link to it again in another video. But all the assumptions we make about people that are not true, or that we make about what people think about us, and they're actually just what we think about ourselves. We're just projecting, right? It happens. We all project sometimes. Exactly. And it's something that ideally we would stop doing. Ideally, right? But we don't live in an ideal world. So we have to live with what we've got. We have to live with what we've got. Yeah. Well, and that's the fourth thing, is distraction. So we've talked about having a good support network. We talked about taking this seriously, taking yourself seriously, taking care of your, taking your journey seriously. Taking your therapy seriously, and not just, not just sinking to the lowest level of what might work, right? And then the next thing is distraction. Distraction is one of the techniques used for DBT. DBT, unlike CBT, CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy that aims to restructure how you think about things and so forth, right? So you think about things differently, and that helps your emotions, right? Proven to be as effective as medication, right? Which a lot of the other things like psychotherapy doesn't have good evidence behind it because there's so much difference in, it's hard to, and that's not to say psychotherapy isn't good. It might still be a very good technique, but the evidence is not good because we don't have, exactly, there varies so much from person to person, and so it's really hard to do good studies on it too. But CBT has been found to be equal to medication, so obviously the ideal thing is get that on board first, less side effects ideally, and then take medication, or if that doesn't work, or do both at the same time is something I'll sometimes offer people who are kind of severe. Yeah. Well, DBT is the thing we're talking about right now. And DBT is dialectical behavioral therapy, which is aimed more towards controlling or managing significant emotions and their interpersonal results, right? It was developed for borderline personality disorder, and it's the only effective treatment for borderline personality disorder. So, sometimes I think people over-label people with borderline. People get labeled borderline who might not have borderline personality disorder, and that's kind of unfair. Doctors have a tendency to just, it's the same kind of thing. I can't figure it out. You have fibromyalgia. I don't like you. You have borderline personality disorder. That's not to say that if that's your diagnosis, your doctor doesn't like you. That's to say I understand if you've experienced discrimination. It happens. On the other hand, you might not be experiencing discrimination, and you might be having just strong emotions. Again, it's the same thing. You gotta go back to that CBT. You gotta download that worksheet that I gave you in the second or third video on automatic negative thoughts, and you gotta work through that every time you have those automatic negative thoughts, right? So I'm just saying, so don't assume you're being discriminated against, please, because then you set yourself up for failure. However, if you have been discriminated against because of having a personality disorder, I get it. And if you are discriminating against yourself, or you're discouraged with yourself because you have a personality disorder, I get it. I get it more than you know. It's difficult sometimes to treat or be treated with when some of these things are really ingrained and have been with us for a long time. So that's what DBT was originally developed for, was to help people who have the very, very strong emotions associated with borderline personality disorder, which is often, like lay people will call it bipolar, and that's not what bipolar disorder is. Bipolar disorder is an energy disorder, whereas like borderline personality disorder is the I love you, I hate you the next day kind of personality. I love you, I hate you, the like I can't. You see, the stereotype is, your young woman with a cutting. That's not, men have it as well. It doesn't always involve self-harm. And we can certainly do a visit about borderline at some point. Today we're just doing more of the relaxing depression stuff here in this place. But we can certainly do a visit about that where we go through the criteria and everything like that. But borderline personality disorder can be very difficult to live with, very difficult to treat. And people will kind of dismiss you sometimes. And so because of that, DBT was developed, and it is very helpful and effective, not just for the aggressive mood swings or aggressive, pain of borderline personality disorder, but for severe depressive pain, severe emotional pain, other things too. So it's a good therapy. And so I have included the first chapter of probably one of the best workbooks I've ever used, and one of the best workbooks that it's a very good, very, very good psychological workbook. I highly recommend it, and I give pieces out to my patients regularly. I hope that you will. I hope that you will look at it. And the fourth technique is I really learned to accept it from there. And it is called distraction. But since I said the word accept, I'm going to give you a bonus technique, okay? It's in the workbook called radical acceptance I want you to go through the workbook and see if you can find it. Okay? And tell me what it means. Comment below if you found it in the workbook and what it means, because radical acceptance sounds very like, whoa, totally radical, dude. But the one we're going to do today is going to be distraction. And it's very useful for people who are in pain. I was in the hospital one time and had a really, really severe episode of chest pain, and the provider, one of the nurses, talked me through it by sitting and talking to me for I think maybe half an hour about Puerto Rico, because I used to live there. I did my medical school there. It was beautiful. And he talked to me about the beaches, and we talked about peñuelas, and we talked about the flamboyant trees, and of course this is image after image after image. So it's taking me, it's using technique number 3 as well. It's taking me out of where I am. Your mind has these abilities for a purpose, so why not use them? Why do we think of being distracted as being a bad thing? Sometimes we stigmatize ADHD too. I also have an ADHD series that is a little bit all over the place. I'll probably revamp it or redo it, but it's certainly, if you just want to listen to someone you want to listen to some inaudible stuff, you can do that over there. But we stigmatize distraction. Sometimes it's good to be distracted. That's how if Einstein the patent clerk hadn't been distracted thinking about the nature of the universe, we wouldn't have a lot of modern physics. Distraction can be a very good thing. Obviously, if it makes you not functional to live your life, it's not a good thing. He was functional. And that's where we start treating it. That's where we talk about things like medications. But distraction is okay. And when you're in pain, or when you can't stop feeling a very, very bad emotion, why not be distracted? What's wrong with it? People judge escapism. And that's part of kind of the modernist, humanist philosophy. Like, oh, escapism is bad. We must be realists. Psh, psh. You can be a realist and also functional, living your life instead of being super depressed, using the real life technique of distraction and the real life beauty around you. Because realism, pessimism, and cynicism are not the same thing as realism, even though the pessimists and the cynicists like to say they are. Mud exists, and poop exists, and pain exists, but so do the flowers that grow in the mud, so do the birds that are singing, and so do pain medications. You gotta look on all sides of things. You can't be stuck on one side. So distract yourself. Don't be like, oh, it's only a temporary measure. Everything is only a temporary measure. Everything. If it gets you through the moment and prevents you from punching your boss in the face, or if it gets you through the moment and prevents you from killing yourself, I don't care how temporary it is. It worked. Every other day, every other moment that you managed to stave off a disaster, I don't care how you did it. You did it. So don't judge yourself, and don't judge techniques because they're not like, oh, I want a permanent fix. I think sometimes being depressed is part of being human, even severe depression. And while there are treatments, and ultimately there are, sometimes you will find a cure for a particular individual, there's no cure for being human. And it may be depression now, it may be death of a family member another time, it may be something else. Something is going to happen. Your life is not going to always be easy, and that's okay, because it is through suffering that you discover who you really are. So, if you need a little bit of help to get through it, a little bit of distraction, go for it. Be an escapist. Enjoy things. Enjoy things a little bit. And distracting yourself. The problem with depression is when it's very severe, you can't distract yourself, right? Because, you've got no interest or no pleasure in anything. So I'm not necessarily talking about doing stuff you enjoy, because you might not feel joy or pleasure. You might look at the flower and be like, whatever. That's why I'm saying distraction, not enjoyment. because you may look at that flower and think, who cares? But then you might play a video game and be paying a lot of attention to it. And it's distracting you from what's going on, and it keeps you from punching your boss. Well, in that case, kept you alive for a little longer. That's good. That's a good thing. At least until you can get to your next therapist appointment. Sometimes you gotta use these smaller techniques, these smaller evidence-based techniques. You gotta use them until you can get to a bigger technique. And sometimes over time, you use a little one long enough, Now, that's not to say that you should distract yourself from your problems and avoid dealing with them. That is the big pitfall. Don't avoid dealing with your problems. You have to get down to the root of them and why you have them. That is why we have the handouts. That is why we have changing your thinking patterns. That's why we have CBT and the changing up how you're thinking. That's why we have that. And there's other parts of DBT that focus on much bigger, like changing interpersonal dynamics and other things like that. But in the moment of a very severe emotional problem, do everything you can. I've had nights where I stayed alive by doing everything I could, and I just... I had one night where I literally pulled every distraction technique out of the book. I got up. I knew that my neurotransmitters were off. I'd already had my medication for the day. I couldn't sleep because I was blah, 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 blah in my head. So I went and got some tea. I drank the tea because, that's got certain chemicals in it that's going to help calm me down. After the tea, I still felt terrible, obviously. I went outside and went for a run, getting those neurotransmitters going. After going out for a run, still felt terrible. I started distracting myself, reading one of my medical textbooks, just reading my medical textbook. I got through a section of that. I was tired, still couldn't sleep. I did a bunch of push-ups, and I did push-ups till I was exhausted, which wasn't very long. Then I went to sleep. What am I saying? What am I saying with it? I'm saying sometimes it's a real struggle. I don't remember that night fondly, and it did not feel like a win. It felt like I was trying everything and nothing was working, and that none of those things worked. But I'm still alive, so they did. They worked for that night. They did. So even though it feels bad, thinking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, it sucks to be so sick. You can't, that's, it's so weak and blah, blah, blah. Why am I so lame that I have to do those things? Just, and there's such dumb little things. And why am I doing that late at night? And blah, 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 blah. The self-talk, the negative self-talk is so terrible. I get it. I understand. I'm so sorry that you're suffering that, because it's not fun. I know it's not fun, my dear. I know it's the worst thing. I don't want you to have to feel that. I want you to live. So, distraction. And sometimes if you're not that badly depressed, I think most people don't have that severe depression. And I know most of the time when you're watching this, you don't have that severe. And so sometimes distraction can bring you pleasure too. And that is why you look up depression ASMR in the search key, because it's something that makes you calm, gives you pleasure, and it's a healthy form of distraction, right? So, and that is why I don't think that we should have regulations so you can't say medical stuff if you're not a doctor. Blah 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 blah. If people on ASMR channels want to pluck your depression away, that's fine. I'm going to take it very, very seriously, and I'm going to hold people accountable if you end up killing yourself after watching a video. And so I'm holding myself accountable, and I don't want, that's why I've always put those numbers down there, because I want to have tried everything possible to make sure that you live, and I don't ever want to minimize your depression to something that can, it's gone. It's gone. I don't want to minimize it like that. I understand that it's very serious. However, those videos are helping you, you wouldn't put it in the search bar if they didn't help you a little bit. And they're helping you through the scientific principle of DT, distraction. So distraction is what we're going to do. This video is so much longer than I had anticipated. So it may be that it will be 2 parts. We might have part 1 today and part 1 tomorrow. What do you think about that? Okay? Alright. What we're going to do with our distraction is I'm going to take you on a road trip. Okay? What do you think? It's your choice. I'm going to take you on a road trip. Go to some place I never thought I was going to go. No, I never put it on my bucket list, and ended up having a lovely time. But I can take you there, and we'll have time together. What do you think?